Well, hi everyone, welcome to Open Elections India, first Google Hangout on air, hosted by Storyful. I'm Asha Phillips, an editor in Asia for Storyful.
And I'm Wais Bashir, speaking to you from Storyful head office in Dublin, Ireland. We'll be moderating this hangout today, which will be discussing the topic of sexual harassment in Egypt. Viewers can ask questions throughout using the hashtag #OpenElectionsEgypt, or by using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of their video screens. We'll take questions throughout the discussion and at the end. I'm very pleased to welcome our distinguished panelists to Hangout on Air. I'm joined by Mohamad Tolba from Cairo. He's a writer and founder of Salfyo Costa movement, which was named after the ultra-Orthodox Muslim group's meeting place at Costa Coffee. Mohamad once wrote a testimonial on a sexual harassment incident he witnessed. He was quoted as saying, "A foreign woman was walking with her husband on the street when a bunch of teenagers approached her, desperately trying to touch any part of her body. It all started when one boy screamed, 'Meat, a piece of meat,' referring to the woman. I tried my best to fight them off. When I tried to talk them out of it, they mockingly said, 'What is she doing here anyway?'" Our next panelist is Mona Eltahawy from Cairo. She's an award-winning columnist and international speaker on Arab and Muslim issues. Born in Port Said, she was awarded with the EU's Samir Kassir Prize for Freedom of Press in 2009.
I'd like to welcome Mariam Mecky, who is a feminist writer and activist and currently a researcher at the Middle East Media Center for Studies. Mariam's written extensively about sexual harassment in Egypt, and in a recent article she commented on the recent draft laws on sexual harassment, saying that criminalisation of sexual harassment is definitely a step forward, but it does require a clearer definition of sexual harassment as a crime, and more guarantees to ensure its implementation. So welcome, Mariam. And finally, last but not least, I'd like to welcome Ramy Moustafa, a legal researcher, currently RSD assistant at the UNHCR. He's also written about the anti-sexual harassment law, saying that this is finally encountered in the draft law as a kind of sexual assault towards women, whereas beforehand we were talking about sexual assaults as only indecent assault or rape, and harassment wasn't actually criminalised in that. So this is strengthening punishment, but more needs to be done. So as we've talked about already, our topic today is sexual harassment in Egypt. So we're going to look specifically at that and how that's affecting the election as well. So in November last year, Thomson Reuters conducted a recent poll, and they found that sexual harassment, as well as high rates of female genital mutilation and a surge in violence, has actually put Egypt at the top of the list as the worst country in the Arab world to be a woman. Some alarming statistics from the United Nations as well, saying that around 99% of women in Egypt have had some kind of sexual harassment, assault or rape, and many perpetrators are not actually being punished. So this month, Egypt's cabinet did approve a draft law defining and criminalising all forms of sexual violence. It's tougher than any preceding law, but activists are saying that it's simply not enough. So some of the details of the law are that violators could face a fine of around 10,000 to 20,000 Egyptian pounds, or a prison term ranging between 1 and 10 years. The victim, though, has to bring the harasser to a police station themselves, along with at least 2 eyewitnesses. So given the impracticality of these requirements, can victims actually expect any justice from the law and its imposition? Let's start with you, Mariam.
I don't think really. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to express... You can, okay. Thank you. It is a pleasure to participate in this panel today. And I don't believe really this law would be effective, because the problem in Egypt that you have the the crime is accepted. It's highly likely that the victim would be blamed for this crime. It's not that you're gonna blame the harasser. The victim is gonna be blamed for how she looks because she's not dressed conservatively enough, and this is the common argument you'd listen. The other problem is most of the enforcers of the law, they do not recognize the intensity or the magnitude of the problem, because they do not really believe that this is a huge problem in Egypt. I just read this article yesterday. They were talking about the state actors and how would the state actors be willing to implement the law. The thing is, many of these state actors, many of the policemen, they say this is not really, sexual violence is not really a problem in Egypt. This is only propaganda. And this is really one of the roots of the problem. Another critical issue is the point of that the victim has to get 2 eyewitnesses when she is reporting the crime. So so it is very highly unlikely that the victim would be able to get 2 eyewitnesses. According to a comprehensive study by the UN in 2013, that 40% of surveyed women said that nobody came to their help where they were harassed or assaulted in public. So bringing the harasser among with 2 eyewitnesses is rather unpractical. So as much as this law could be a step forward, I don't think it's going to be that effective in Egypt, unfortunately.
Thanks, Mariam. Mohamad, what's your opinion?
Thank you, everyone, for having me in this panel, and I would agree with Mariam in the aspect that the victim will be blamed. I would say that the problem in Egypt is using sexual harassment by different groups. So you will find that different parties, whether they are conservatives or whether they are liberals, they would use they would politicize sexual harassment in a way. So you'd find the so-called Islamists. I don't believe the term Islamist, but however, they would use that. You can find them saying that, guys, you see in our sit-ins, marches, and so on, you won't find any sexual harassment because we are the good guys. And on the other side, you will find that so-called liberal parties, they would say that those in Rab'a or having sit-ins or having what's so-called jihad al-nikah, or, you know, in a way, there is this using the female body as a tool in politics, which is you know, refused. This created some sort of acceptance by the society and the community that using their own medias, different parties or different groups would use the media in a way. This would say that they're using the media to give some sort of a reason for the people to harass a young lady or even an old lady. Age is not the problem. Even how they are dressed is not the problem anymore. I would like to use a good, you know, I'll try to be a bit positive. However, it's not by any means, I'm not optimistic by any means. However, I'll try to be optimistic. Like 10 years ago, the girls who are harassed would find it difficult to express their accident or their experience according to the community, and that she would be blamed. Like 10 years or maybe 7 to 8 years back, we found out that those who've been harassed have the guts or have the courage to come up and speak. And first of all, the parents were not so cooperative that they don't want to, you know, want to listen, want to admit it. And then, you know, the media started to take part of it. At the end of the day, we found, or maybe like last year, we found like movements fighting sexual harassment. So it's very, I would say that that's the bless of freedom of speech, that they are heard, they have voices and they are heard. I always link this freedom of speech by minority rights and those who were victims to any kind of harassments and so on.
Thanks, Mohamad. And Ramy, how about you?
Thank you. First, I'd like to say that I'm very glad to be with you here to discuss such an issue. I'd like to start say that I agree with both Mohamad and Mariam that our society in Egypt is always blaming the victim in case of sexual harassment. But I don't agree that implementing the law is useless because there are several stages of making a law. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we've got you.
Okay. There are different stages to make the law, to make it, to use the law. The first thing that you have to issue a law admitting that there is a problem in the society. The second one is to implement these laws you issued. And this is the stage where we are still standing even after issuing the new law. It's a problem of how to implement this law, because as Mariam said, those who are concerned with implementing the law, like the police officers, saying that there is nothing called sexual harassment. It's such a political idea, but it's not a crime. The Egyptian Center for Women's Rights issued a report saying that 62.4% of the men who were surveyed by ECWR, which is the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights, admitted that they are admitted to having harassed someone.
Oh, we seem to. Hello, Ramy?
They did something. The society will stand. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. The problem is that these guys who committed sexual harassment know that they committed something wrong, but they know that they are not punishable by the law, and even if the law says that this is a punishable thing, it will not be implemented. And when they go to the police station or something like this, the police officers themselves will stand by them, will not stand by the victim. So as I said, I see that making such a law is a good step, but the problem with us is how to implement this law, how to spread awareness about the sexual harassment, so that the society can help those who are implementing the laws to make it, not to make it useless, as Mariam and Mohamad said.
Okay, thank you, Ramy, for your comments, and thank you all for your comments on the first question. I'd just like to add that Mona's having connection problems, and will try to join us shortly. And I'd like to go on to the second question, which also refers to one of the comments that Mariam made in her answer, that according to the 2013 United Nations study on sexual harassment and violence in Egypt, 40% of women surveyed said nobody came to their aid when they were harassed or assaulted in public. And in nearly 20% of these cases in which security forces did intervene, they reportedly scolded, mocked, and harassed the victim. So the victims are often the ones who are punished. We've heard these stories over and over. The female student at Cairo University that was sexually assaulted by a crowd of her male peers on campus, the reaction from her university president, Jabbar Nasser, appeared to put the blame on her choice of clothes, a pink long-sleeved sweater and black jeans, and said she might be punished along with her attackers. He later withdrew his remark, although according to Ahram Online, local TV presenter Tamir Amin said of the victim, "These are dancers' clothes, provoking, seducing, revealing much more than they should."
No.
What can be done to stop society from shifting the blame onto the victims of sexual harassment? I'd like to start by asking Ramy.
Yes. I think that the first step that we have to take to shift the blame from the victim to the perpetrators, the thing is those who are concerned with implementing the laws, those who are decision makers of Egypt, such as the public prosecutor, the Minister of Interior, have to make strong statements saying that they will deal with sexual harassment seriously, and they will deal with the reports in a serious way, in a legal way, and they have to spread awareness through the media about the new law, the new law fighting sexual harassment. What's the penalties in case of if you harass someone? Encouraging these movements started 3 or 4 years ago, like anti-harassment and Basma and others, to work with the help of the police and the police forces, so that they can work in a place where they are supported by the police, and the people who are making sexual harassment themselves will feel that the police and the prosecutors are taking it seriously, and if they commit such an act, they will be punished for it. I think that's the first thing that we have to do to deal with, to shift the blame from on the victim to the others.
Okay, thank you, Ramy. And it seems like Mona has managed to join us in the panel. Mona, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you?
Fantastic. Yes, we can hear you. So,
Okay.
Mona, I'm not sure if you caught that question. Did you catch the question?
Was it the question about victims and blaming the victim?
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it's a huge problem in the case for decades now. I think what's been happening is that more and more women are willing to speak out about it. Society has been forced to look at this issue finally, but I don't think that anyone takes it seriously enough or is trying to understand why this has been happening for so long. So we're still at this stage where, as you were saying, that student at Cairo University was blamed for the way that she dressed. And although every now and then we get a case that goes to court, it's still not something that people are taking seriously. And I think that this is not going to go away anytime soon. I love the new initiatives that Ramy mentioned, but I think that they're very limited, and a lot of them are focused on protests, which we no longer have in Egypt because of the protest law. And I think we need something much wider and much more nationwide for it to start to be taken seriously.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your comments, Mona. I'd like to direct that question to Mohamad. Hello, Mohamad, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry. I would like to advise the people who are concerned from the authorities to stop using the priests and the scholars or the shuyukh to solve this problem, because simply we are not a religious nation by any means. I won't say that I cannot accept the idea that a religious nation would have the highest rates of sexual harassment in the region. That's really contradicting. So we have to set the fact that we are not religious by any means, and we have to stop, overusing this statement for some political objectives and goals. And regarding for the authority that is responsible for implementing the law, I would say it's the police. And simply, lots of us, lots of Egyptians would have worries to report such a problem to the police station, because simply the police station has some sexual harassment track record. So you cannot have this, the guys responsible for implementing the law, and they have really bad history in sexual harassment. And there are very famous videos in this regards. So I would say that yes, I would agree with Mona that we have to find a way nationwide to solve the problem. We have to go. I guess that the issue of dehumanizing each other is the problem. We should find some sort of a very long-term solution, because at the moment I cannot find a very clear short-term solution by any means.
Okay, well, thank you. Sorry, Mariam, would you like to jump in? Hello, Mariam?
Definitely. I'd like to completely agree Mona, Ramy,
It appears that we've just lost Mariam there. She may jump back in when she can. Just experiencing a poor internet connection.
I think she's reconnected.
Okay, Mariam seems to be back, yes.
Yes, I'm very sorry. Internet disconnection. I wanted firstly to comment on Ramy's comments. Yes, I completely agree because the media plays an important role, and the problem is there is no role models in the media that actually criticize harassment. Like the example you gave, the problem of Tamer Emin, and he actually blamed the victim for it. Another problem is that's very significant that both of the current presidential candidates does not address the problem, and even if they talked about it, they said that the laws knowing it might be an opportunity to fix it. The problem lies in society. None of them highlighted how important this problem is. And the thing is, one of the most highly likely candidates to win, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, actually was the one who claimed responsibility of the virginity test when he was a member of the SCAF.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we've lost Mariam there. I'm sure she'll jump back in when she can. Asha, would you like to take the next question?
Sure. Sorry to all the viewers for all the technical issues. I guess that's the way it is in Egypt. Okay, well, let's move on and talk a little bit more about sexual harassment in terms of politics, because obviously we've been building this community on Google Plus, and these hangouts are to discuss, the upcoming election as well. So during the first TV interview for one of the presidential candidates, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he said that he would work hard to crack down on these deep-rooted issues of sexual harassment and assault in Egypt. And he also called on the media to encourage the efforts, also saying that awareness and legislation could help to face the issue. So do we actually think that this is going to help him when it comes to voter support? And what about the other candidate, Hamdeen Sabahi? What have we heard from him on his stance on the issue? I'd like to go to Mariam first, if you heard the question.
I did hear the question. But the thing is, they basically did not address the issue as they should be. Most candidates, they do address the issue. I believe Abdel Fattah al-Sisi basically tackled the issue because it is for popular support to maintain the amount of women who are actually supporting him. But when you listen to them talking about sexual harassment, they do not really realize the magnitude of the problem. And when it comes to Sabahi, I did my research on his statements when it comes to sexual harassment, and basically there is nothing concrete. When it comes, for them, it's the problem of his protest, it's politics, it's energy. They do not really consider this problem with its magnitude.
Thanks, Mariam. Mohamad, would you like to jump in there? I believe you are muted, Mohamad.
Sorry.
No problem.
Yes, I would say that we didn't see the program of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and so it's so normal that we won't see the item or how he's gonna solve the problem of sexual harassment. I don't say I can't believe that any of the presidential candidates are capable of solving the problem, and they are not even willing to solve the problem because they have first to see it as a problem. So if they are not considering it as a problem, a serious one that is, it also can be transformed into some, economical measurements. Like if women or females are not safe, not feeling safe, so this will let them, go out to the streets more often. So it's really a problem. We need to find a way to convince the candidates to have their hands on this problem, and we need to find some sort of, incentives for them to take part of it. It's really scary now. It's really collapsing, I would say, and nobody's really addressing the problem. All the candidates would address the problem, would address other problems like economical problems, fighting terrorism, and all this stuff. But nobody would go and say that's a problem and that's something I can solve, because they don't see it and they don't want to see it.
Thanks, Mohamad. Ramy, can I come to you with a response on that question?
Oh, I couldn't hear you well.
Can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you well.
Okay, there seems to be some connection issues. I was asking the question around the two presidential candidates and their viewpoint on how they're going to curb sexual harassment and whether that's going to help them sway voters.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to say that I agree with Mohamad and Mariam on what they said. And concerning Hamdin Sabahi, as Mariam said, we can't find. I read a lot of statements of him, and I saw many videos of him, many presentations. I didn't see that he tackled the problem of sexual harassment as it's a crime. He's always saying dealing this as a matter of politics. Concerning Abdel Fattah Sisi, we don't need to talk about how he will deal with the problem of sexual harassment, because as Mohamad said, we don't have his program yet, his program for election for presidential elections yet. Second, we all know about what the SCAF committed during the revolution, like virginity tests, and how Abdel Fattah Sisi defended those who committed these crimes and blamed the victims on it. So I don't think we have to, concerning Abdel Fattah Sisi, I don't think we have to talk a lot about how he sees the problem of sexual harassment and how he will deal with the sexual harassment, because if he dealt with sexual harassment as he did with while he was in the SCAF, or the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, I think it will not differ a lot when it comes to presidential elections.
Thank you. Mona, are you back? Can you hear us clearly?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we have you. I just wanted to check, did you hear my question earlier, or would you like me to repeat it for you?
No, I heard the question. The only thing I didn't hear is I can't hear Mariam very well. So if I end up repeating anything she said, I apologize for that. But I heard Ramy and Mohamad. I think, 2 points that I would make. One, I think it's pretty obvious to most of us in Egypt that Abdel Fattah Sisi is going to be our next president. And I think it's a disgrace that our next president is going to be a man who's so closely associated with the sexual assault of Egyptian women, of Egyptian female revolutionaries. And he comes from a military background, and the military is not known for caring about women's issues. And even when it comes to Hamdin Sabahi and any candidate who's going to run in these elections, women's issues are seen as frivolous. Women's issues are not seen as a priority for anybody. You often hear, on all levels of Egyptian society, oh, when we fix the economy, when we fix transportation, when we fix the weather, when we fix we fix everything, then people want to talk about women's issues. And I think that what's really missing is this understanding that central to everything is fixing women's issues, especially something as horrendously prevalent as sexual violence against Egyptian women. I mean, Egyptian streets are not safe for girls and women these days. Whether you are a protest, as we saw over the past 2.5 years, because as I said, we haven't had protests in a long time, or to just walk along the street. And this affects Egyptian girls and women's lives on every level, to go to school, to go to work, to go to university, and no one's addressing this. And it can be very simple. I wish we had a candidate who would say something like, something I'd love to see is sensitization or sensitivity training for doctors and nurses. When I went to the emergency room after I was assaulted, and I told the nurse what happened to me and that I'd been sexually assaulted, the first thing she asked me was, how could you let them do this to you? And this is the Egyptian police. This is riot police. who sexually assaulted me and broke both my arms. So this is the emergency room. So from every level, we don't have the police awareness. The police themselves often assault us, as Mohamad said. We don't have a sensitive medical staff that could take care of our needs. We don't have an understanding that girls and women deserve space out there on the streets with boys and men in Egypt. So honestly, both candidates, but specifically Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, leave a lot to be desired when it comes to women's safety in Egypt.
Oh, thank you very much, Mona, for your comments and for sharing us your personal experience as well. I'd like to bring up the next question. So we discussed sexual harassment against women, but what about sexual harassment against men? Does it exist? We don't hear much about it. I'd like to direct this question first to Mohamad. Hello, Mohamad.
Yes, okay. I would say that for a reason, there is these very famous YouTube videos. You will find that sexual harassment is happening at police stations. And again, it's always used as some sort of pressuring the harassed person. It's not as, it's not like that a man would go in a crowded area and he will be harassed by men or by women. It's usually used as a tool of pressuring and using it to pressure the guy that's being harassed. I don't recall any experiences in this part, except for the guy who used to work as a driver, I guess, and he was sexually harassed, and that was before the revolution. Inside the police station, it's a very famous YouTube video, and simply that the case was that the officer wanted to humiliate the guy, and he wanted to threaten the guy in a way. So it's usually used as a tool to threaten people and pressure them.
Okay, well, yes, as you mentioned, that video is available on YouTube. I would like to direct this question to Mariam. Mariam, can you hear me? You just need to unmute your microphone. Hello, Mariam. Okay, so I'll pass this on to Ramy. Ramy, if you could jump in there. And so what do you think about the issue of sexual harassment against men? Is it tactical? And what are your thoughts about this?
Okay, first, men, many people are not aware of that sexual harassment can be committed against men, not just women. There's a report issued by Harassment, a place where I used to be a volunteer in, saying that 2.5% of the reports Harassment has received in 2010 and 2011 were from men who had been harassed by women or men. That says that there are some people who understands that there is sexual harassment can be committed against men, but many others are not aware of such an issue. And I think when it comes to men, it's in our society is very embarrassing, just like women, but it's more embarrassing for men to say that I have been harassed by a man in the road while I was going to etc. So that's how here in Egypt we as men are dealing with sexual harassment against us, but it's not happening that much. Just like sexual harassment against women. That's all I have to say about sexual harassment against men.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Harassment, and for our viewers, if they are not aware of Harassment, it is a website that crisis maps reports of sexual harassment by SMS and tweets, and it's a very useful website to get some more data on the issue of sexual harassment. I'd like to put this question forward to Mona. Mona, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I think, you know, language is really important, and I don't often use sexual harassment. I think sexual harassment is too tame a term. I much prefer sexual assault or sexual violence, and to distinguish the physical assault from the verbal, I'd obviously say, you know, a verbal sexual assault. So I will address this as a sexual assault against men. And I think the main difference, other than the difference in percentages that we see in Egypt regarding sexual violence against women and against men, is that when it comes to men, it's the regime or the state that uses sexual assault and sexual violence against men as a form of humiliation and political pressure, as we've heard Mohamad and Ramy both say. But when it comes to the street, I think, and this is why I want to make a difference, the street uses it against women. So the point I'm making is the regime and the street use sexual violence against women for various reasons, but it's specifically the state or the regime itself that uses it against men. And I know that human rights groups for a long time now have documented sexual violence in Egyptian prisons and Egyptian police stations against opponents of the regime, be they secular or Islamist. And there was one, other than Imad Kabir case that Mohamad mentioned, the bus driver, there was another famous case of an activist called Mohamad Tolba, who I think it was 2006, he was one of the kind of the chant leaders during the whole Kifaya movement in 2005, 2006, and he was detained for a while in Aslanil police station in downtown Cairo, and he smuggled out a letter explaining how he had been sexually assaulted while he was detained, and it was one of the several cases by which Egyptian men broke the shame barrier to speak out about how they're often sexually violated by the regime. But again, I conclude what I'm saying by making that very important difference, that the regime uses sexual violence. For men, it usually comes from the regime, but for women, it comes from the regime and the street. And I think that's an important difference to keep in mind.
Some very interesting comments there, and I'd like to remind viewers that comments and quotes are being tweeted from the Storyful account, which is @Storyful. And I would like to direct the same question about sexual harassment against men to Mariam. And if you agree with the other panelists, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry that it didn't want to unmute before. I completely agree with the distinction Mona did, because yes, mostly sexual harassment or sexual assaults against men are directed by the state as a mean of pressure, of political pressure. However, I do believe that it happens on the streets, but with a very, very few, it's much fewer than women. And the thing is, men who are sexually assaulted, they see it as a form of weakness. And it is very, very humiliating, as we live in a patriarchal society, for them to admit that they're sexually assaulted, for them to admit that they're vulnerable to a great extent like women. So that's why it's very highly unlikely to find that men are reporting they're sexually assaulted. But like Mona said, there was this Kifaya activist who admitted, and he broke the barriers and he spoke up. However, this is not very common for Egyptian men. If you actually hear common Egyptian men talk about it, it's very humiliating, and mostly they would see it as a form of emasculation.
Very interesting. Thank you for your comments, Mariam. And thank you to the other panelists for your reflections on that question. And Asha, I'd like to pass it on to you.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I heard Mona speaking before about police, you know, in some ways being a part of this. So they're not really acting as a deterrent so much. You know, so what's the view really on, you know, their role and what role they can or should be playing in terms of protecting victims or preventing this from happening in the future? Mona, let's go to you.
Right. Well, you know, over the past few months, we heard of a female police unit and we've seen pictures of them going on the women's cars in the metro, and they've been kind of, you know, paraded as a way by which the Ministry of the Interior is trying to tackle this. But honestly, I think it's just very, very cosmetic. if we want to talk about the police, I think there are two main points to keep in mind, and they're very important for me personally, and I hope we see these initiatives soon. Number one, I would like to stay away from prison terms and just focusing on the police arresting people and putting them in jail, because I have a huge problem with the prison system in Egypt, and you know, you hear horrendous stories of torture, as I mentioned before, and many of the panelists have mentioned. Abuse of various kinds happens at a lot of police stations and jails. So I would like to see human rights groups and activists generally working with the police to find, you know, to hold people accountable, but not just by throwing them into jail, because I have a huge problem with our prison system. Number two, I would like the sensitivity training that I mentioned with the medical profession. I would love it if all these groups that have come out over the past few years that were trying to help women in protests began to focus more on training the police, approaching the Ministry of the Interior, which I know a lot of us have a huge problem with, but at the end of the day, we have to work with them, because they are the ones who are supposed to be out there, you know, helping and protecting and solving crimes, etc. So I would love to see some kind of sensitization training or sensitivity training to just one police precinct that we could use as an example. You know, I heard a wonderful story from a Swedish journalist a few weeks ago about how in Sweden they have this campaign where if a woman, for example, has been sexually assaulted, instead of going to the police station and having to kind of relive her assault and her trauma, they created a safe house. And she goes to this safe house, and the police come to her, and the therapists come to her, and anyone from the medical profession come to her, where she feels safe and she doesn't feel re-violated and re-traumatized. I would love for us to see all these kind of pilot programs that have been used successfully across the world, and like I said, take one precinct in Egypt and use it as an example, and then hopefully replicate it across the country. The last thing I want to see is to unleash the brutality, the very well-known brutality of our police force against men who we want to hold accountable for sexually violating or assaulting women. I don't want to just recreate this pattern of violence. I would like these men to be held accountable, to not escape with impunity as they have been, but I would like the police to be trained in a sensitive way to deal with the women who have survived sexual violence, but also to find a new way of holding these men accountable.
Thanks, Mona. Very valid points there. Mohamad, can I go to you?
Yes. My wife works as an English teacher in a kindergarten in 6th of October city. They made some sort of an initiative to educate the young kids. First of all, to educate the teachers how to deal with, or how to find out that the child was under some sort of sexual harassment or not. And again, they try to train them to find some sort of signals or signs that there is an issue of sexual harassment that took place to this kid in his house. Then they try to communicate this to the kids. And I would like to say that we need such initiatives to be spreaded in schools. We need it from the grassroots. We need it in the families. We need to tell the people you have to speak out. You have to express what happened bravely. And this will not happen unless the media is really cooperative and the media is concerned that this is an issue. The media, for some reason, Egypt, they create the mass awareness, and they choose what is important and what is not. And if we did not deal with the issue from the grassroots, I guess that solving the issue through the police or through the authorities would not solve anything, because again, we need it. The society has a problem, and we have to be brave enough, and we have to be to face it. Such initiatives inside schools, kindergartens, and even those, you know, one of the very high risk streets. It's like the downtown zone, and one of the seasons are the religious feasts, which is so contradicting for a so-called religious nation. So we have to try to create some sort of initiatives with those working in these shops, because, you know, downtown is a commercial area. So if we cannot find a way to communicate with those the owners of the shops, if they how to report the sexual harassment, how to stop sexual harassment with the police. We need to localize our solution instead of importing or opening a guide to find the magical solution, which is not there.
Thanks, Mohamad. Just finally, Ramy, I want to ask you your opinion. What role should the police play, or other parts of civil society, in the prevention of sexual harassment?
Okay, I'd like first to thank Mona for her very good points concerning how can we deal with sexual harassment with the police. I think that I said before that I was working with anti-harassment campaign. We were in Tahrir Street, Tahrir Square, when we saw an incident of sexual harassment. It turned to a fight between us and these people who harassed the girl. Some of us tried to approach the police officers and telling them that we are from anti-harassment movement, and we saw someone is harassing a girl. We need you to help us to catch this guy and send them to the police station. He said that I have nothing to do with this. You see that you are many. You can deal with this. We be standing next to us in the streets, helping girls, and girls themselves will feel that the police itself is helping them. Whenever it happens, the police officers are helping them to make reports and to get to catch those who are harassing them. The second thing, I agree with Mona that brutality will not help in ending sexual harassment, but it will turn it to a revenge. This person who will be taken to prison and will be tortured or beaten or anything will be, when he gets out, it will turn into a revenge from women because they were the reason why that's happened to him in the first place. I think we have police should deal with those who are committing sexual harassment with the right way, with the legal way. They should take him with all due respect according to law and send him to the prosecutors. Then he will be sent to court to get his penalty. And to be sent to prison. But I think, as Mohamad, I want to respond to Mohamad's point, saying that we have to start with the society itself. I agree with them. We have to start with the society, but in the same way, the girl who were sexually assaulted or harassed by a person has the right to see this person in prison. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ramy. Thank you for your thoughts. I would like to ask the next question, which is about education. Now, we're getting a lot of reports, we're receiving lots of reports out of the experiences of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and often it is committed by very young boys. Now, what needs to be done in terms of education in order to change this? Should it come from the schooling system? Should it come from the home? And should the candidates actively state that they are trying to change this, trying to change the syllabus as such, in order to educate the young boys? I'd like to ask this question to Mona.
I think that there are many things that we can do without waiting for the syllabus to be changed or to overhaul the curriculum, or these massive things that people say will take a long time. I think we can start with some kind of simple campaign that redefines what being a man is. I mean, we have these notions of masculinity and femininity are socially constructed. We can reconstruct them. We can deconstruct them. I would love to see a famous football player like Abu Trika, for example, who recently retired. He used to play for Ahli Football Club and a national football team. I would love to see him take part in a campaign across the country where we see him on television and on billboards that are as massive as election campaign billboards, saying something simple like, a real man does not sexually violate a woman. A real man respects a woman. Because, when you talk about these young boys, they're obviously picking up signals from older boys, and they're trying to emulate older boys, and they think this is what a quote-unquote man does in Egypt. And I have so many friends in Egypt, you know, male friends, and, you know, I often ask them, and it's a very silly question, but it goes to the heart of this. I'll ask them, you know, is this the kind of man you want to be? And obviously the answer is no. So how about we tackle this? Just get some male icons, you know, famous men that these boys look up to, and put them on billboards and put them on television and put them on the radio, explaining to these young boys, and pop stars. And, you know, unfortunately last year we had a famous pop star, Tamir Amin, not Tamir Amin, he's on television, Tamir Hosni. He had this terrible song with Snoop Dogg that just perpetuated horrendous stereotypes of women. I would like to see famous pop stars, famous football players, redefining what a real man is and encouraging young boys to respect women, and just telling them something simple. A real man does not sexually assault a woman. We can start with something that simple without waiting to overhaul our school system.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you for your thoughts on that. I'd be very interested to see if any celebrity picks up on that point and would like to campaign against sexual harassment. I'd like to point the same question about the education system, and if the candidates should directly state that they're willing to change the education system in order to counter sexual harassment in Egypt. I'd like to point that question towards Mohamad.
Okay, yes, as I said before, it's like these initiatives that's been taking place in preschools and kindergartens and inside schools are very important. We need to clearly define what is a sexual harassment for young boys and young girls and for the family. We need to create some sort of multidimensional solution to involve all the parties, the parents, the society, the victim, the police, the teachers, but not the scholars and the priests, please. And we need to find some sort of an awareness to take place. We should not, as Mona said, wait for such very long-term solutions to change the syllabus, because it's not about the syllabus, it's about the behavior itself. It's about how we perceive this. If like a group of schools decided to make some sort of a campaign that they are making, you know, these psychiatrists and people concerned with solving the sexual harassment issues, they should come with initiatives, and they should again start with the grassroots, and they should teach the young boys and girls how to avoid sexual harassment, how to deal with sexual harassment, and how to define that this is sexual harassment. Maybe these initiatives would take like 10 years, but you know, we have been facing sexual harassment for the past like 30 years. So I'm sure that one generation will gain the fruits of this.
Well, thank you for your comments, Mohamad. I'd like to direct that question towards Mariam, and we may not have time to ask the panelists, the other panelists. So, Mariam, your thoughts about the education system and the presidential candidates actively trying to change it. Do you think that's a solution?
I think a very long-term solution, because the education system in Egypt is a very rigid system. So attempting to try it to incorporate anti-harassment motion is going to be a very long-term goal. And that's why I completely agree, and I advocate Mona's idea about doing this awareness campaign that actually encourage young men to tell them what is exactly how they're supposed to act, what kind of respect they should give women. And another point I would like to mention is societal awareness. The problem with the many initiatives working now, although it's not really their fault, that they're not that much inclusive. Usually they target specific segments in society when it comes to sexual harassment, when it comes usually women from certain classes, with certain interests are the one who are involved in such. There is not usually young boys, young girls, families, old people are not involved in such awareness campaigns, and that's why societal awareness campaigns should be more inclusive. For instance, I watched this video, I don't remember which initiative launched it. This video targeted young young girls from school, and most girls actually said that if a girl got harassed, it's her fault. It's not the boy's fault. She's probably wearing something revealing enough, or she's impolite, so that's why they're harassing her. And that's the problem. These young girls are not really targeted. They're not aware of what they're saying. They're only repeating the words they hear in their houses. So I think both should work in conjunction, like an awareness campaign for guys for what they're exactly supposed to do, how they're supposed to act, and at the same time something with families for them to educate their children rather than waiting for the system to improve itself.
Thanks, Mariam. Great comments. We have one question from the audience which relates to this, so I want to put that to Mona and Mariam if we get time. So the question is that, do you think that the current candidates could actually become these role models for other men themselves? Mona, I'll go to you first.
Well, I'll keep my answer very short so that Mariam can jump in. I absolutely do not think that Abdel Fattah el-Sisi can be this role model, because, as I said, I think it's a disgrace that our future president is so associated with the sexual assault of women. Hamdeen Sabahi, I think if he was a bit more forthcoming and he actually talked about this and gave us some concrete examples of how he could fight it, perhaps. But Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, absolutely not.
Thanks, Mona. Mariam.
In fact, I completely agree with Mona. The thing is, it's very wishful thinking with the current signs and current action, to think that the upcoming president will be a role model. Because if they would be, they would speak out right now, they would talk about it, they would address the problem, but unfortunately we can't. And we have Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who's most likely is going to be president. He's associated with the virginity test, like Mona said. So it's wishful thinking. It's merely wishful thinking.
Thanks for your comment, Mariam. So we're almost out of time, so I want to wrap this up and say thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks to the audience as well. We did have a few other audience questions that unfortunately we couldn't get through. Some were actually same questions that we were asking as well, so it's good to see that the viewers are thinking about this the same way that we are as well. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists today for your time and your thoughts and opinions. And everyone, we're going to continue this conversation and other conversations around the elections on our Open Elections Egypt Google Plus community. So we'll see you all on there, and we will be scheduling another hangout on there next week. Details on that will be posted shortly, and that will be on a different topic. So thanks again to everyone and also to our viewers. Thank you.